Hello, everyone. I'm Maximiliano Cardomagno, Innoscience founding partner. Thanks for being with us. This is the Corporate Innovation Talks, Innoscience podcast, where we explore new trends, frameworks, and in this case, very interesting theoretical and practical perspective about corporate innovation. So I'm here together with my two partners at Innoscience, Marco Perocco. Hi, Marco.
Hi, Max. Thank you.
Hi, Felipe.
Hey, Max. It's great to be here.
Thank you, guys. So today we are very proud to be with a special guest, Marcel Bogers. Thank you, Marcel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here these days in Brazil with us, sharing your knowledge and in some way being part of the local ecosystem. So our idea for this episode, guys, is to talk about open innovation, of course, ecosystems, and to learn more with Marcel about the European experience of open innovation and ecosystems. So for those who don't know Marcel yet, Marcel Bogers is a full professor of open and collaborative innovation at Eindhoven Technology University and a research fellow at the Garwood Center for Corporate Innovation at the Haas School of Business of the University of California, Berkeley. So I would like to start exploring this idea of ecosystems, especially here in Brazil. Open innovation has been seen as a dyadic relationship between two parts, especially the large company and the startup. And maybe the original idea from Henry Chesbrough research was this incumbent American Silicon Valley-based corporation searching for new solutions or new applications for their knowledge and resources. But as we know nowadays, we are living this ecosystem world, and I know that your research has been exploring this transition from the open innovation as a bilateral relationship between two parts and the ecosystem approach. Could you give us some thoughts about this evolution of the open innovation perspective? And again, thanks for being here with us.
No, sure. Really appreciate the opportunity. There are worse places in the world to be, so I'm happy to be here and also join with a couple of questions here. So I think first of all, it's a good observation, right? As you say, sort of the work of Henry. With sort of going back more than 2 decades now, has spurred, of course, a lot of interest in this idea of open innovation. And I think you're right that maybe in the beginning there was a large focus, sort of, by sort of the nature of also his original work, large US-based companies. And I think just to put it in the broader perspective, so I agree that over the years, of course, we've seen research in many other domains. So also going from large to small companies. Also maybe in even non-profit context, of course, different parts of the world as well, where we see different dynamics that we'll probably also be talking about today also. And indeed, I think one of the main transitions as I've seen them and I've been interested in is sort of the move from the more firm level perspective on open innovation to the ecosystem perspective. Which, from my point of view, is a lens that provides a broader perspective on these collaborative arrangements, because that's essentially what an ecosystem is. And we have different types of ecosystems. We can also talk more about that as well. But essentially, it's really about the collaborative arrangement, and you basically move the unit of analysis from the firm to the ecosystem level, where you look at the joint value creation. So we often talk about business models, which are about value creation, value capture on the firm level, but ecosystem is really about how does that move, to the constellation of actors that work together in the ecosystem. How do you then jointly create value, but still sort of distribute the value that can be captured by each of the partners. So those are some of the aspects that play a role. Of course, there's much more to say about it, but I'm sure you have more questions that help me guide my answers on that.
Yes. So building on that point, what are the role of universities and research institutions in shaping this ecosystem, especially for deep tech innovations, which is a growing topic nowadays here in Brazil and in Latin America?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting. And I think also in Eindhoven, we have, in that sense, a similar discussion. We also focus a lot on the deep tech technology developments. In a way, maybe to some extent, the scale is different. Our city compared to yours here. So that is also interesting, I think, for us to learn about. And I think you have some advantages with the scale here as well. But your question, of course, also more about sort of the role of universities. So, in fact, also in our research, we've had a couple of research projects that specifically look into that topic as well. And we've even been, discussing it. We try to introduce sort of a novel topic or framework that we call the fourth generation university, and it links, I think, a little bit to your perspective, because of course the university originally launched for education, then adding teaching, then adding impact, but in a sort of often, let's say, an inside-out perspective. So how can you push from a technology transfer perspective, create economic value from knowledge and technology developed in the university? So the idea with this fourth generation is that it's adding another layer, which is really much more about being embedded in the societies, also addressing particular societal challenges. It's much more also about getting sort of the outside in. So how can you connect to the local ecosystem, and very much, and I think this is especially related to your question, very much also seeing the university as an ecosystem orchestrator. Because when you ask about ecosystems, so right, it's distributed value creation and so on. But it's really, okay, how do you govern that, right? So who has which role, decision making, how do you make those arrangements? Because all the parties in the ecosystem are still independent, but also interdependent, right? So they also depend on each other. And then, this is an interesting role, I think, of the university, or potentially, because it's really about, let's say, taking also to some extent a neutral role. And I think this is where a great potential lies, because we obviously it's about involving the entire, let's call it the triple helix, or the quadruple helix even. So you have of course the industry, you have government, and then also the academic institutions. That's a triple helix, and then quadruple helix is about adding also society to that. But then who is really taking that role, right? That's the leading role in that. I mean, companies have their particular agenda. I think there's maybe even a trend that there's more focused on short-term investment rather than long-term, which is probably the opposite of what you would like to see for deep tech investment, for example. Of course, governments also have a particular timeline. There's a political agenda as well. Then, of course, from a societal perspective, I mean, it's a very distributed perspective. But I think the university as such can play a kind of a crucial role, because it's providing the knowledge. It can be a central player in the entire ecosystem. So then, to answer your question, I think there's great potential, but still the question is, how do you do that? How does it sort of align or maybe contradict with some of the other missions that the university has? So I mean that's still an open question. How that would play out, I would say.
Yeah, totally agree. You highlight in your research the role of trust in this ecosystem approach, and this is something that we have been seeing in the relationship between large companies and startups. But how can the orchestrator accelerate trust building between those diverse actors, especially when timelines and incentives differ so much, like among entrepreneurs, researchers, policymakers, and top management teams of large companies that have to deliver for the next quarter? What are the findings of your research about this trust building process?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, trust is essentially like a governance mechanism, right? So it's more an informal type, based on the relationship that people have, compared to maybe more formal governments, like through contracts and so on. And of course, one thing doesn't necessarily exclude the other. You typically need both of them. But I mean, that's sort of more the generic perspective that, trust as such helps to cultivate those relationships, to essentially make agreements. And I think what you can see in those examples is that it really helps to let the ecosystem develop, and maybe also in particular in an emergent phase, but maybe even more general. Because if you have a more trust-based relationship, when we talk about value creation and capture, it's also about, do you trust the other? Can you make an agreement with them, even if it's not fully signed and made explicit? And it's also about, it's not purely trust as such, but it's also about understanding that it's not only about you, it's about the entire system, and it's about also the other gaining something for it, right? So you also make an investment that's going to help another, but you will also ultimately benefit from it yourself. We often talk about it's growing the pie, right? You have a piece of the pie, but you grow the entire pie together. So even if you have just one piece, which is maybe not growing from a percentage point of view, you still ultimately will gain from it,
Yeah.
But can I ask a question back to you?
Of course. I'm gonna ask Felipe and Marco to.
Yeah, maybe because I think it's such an interesting question. Also, the trust issue, and we see in some of our research also that there are some differences, in different regions and so on. And my understanding is that this is also one of the cultural elements here, is that there can be lack of trust on certain levels. I mean, it's very relational, like society, I think, but still, trust maybe in a corporate setting. So that I'm curious to learn from you about that as well. So what is your own experience with that? And is it like a hampering factor in developing those ecosystems also in your own experience and the ecosystem you're building yourself?
Actually, in a cultural point of view, Brazil is closer to the Southern Europe, so trust here is based on personal relations. Yeah. We have a high bureaucracy and quite a regional inequality. So, we are. Technology transit officer is sort of kind of an evolution way here in Brazil, where there's room for improvement,
Yeah.
And
in some way, we as consultants and innovation intermediaries, we play a role which is to moderate and to mediate the relationship between different actors trying to balance the value creation and value capture among those actors, and especially between large companies and startups, trying to remember them, why they are here, what are their goals, how can we work in a more effective way, and
actually trying to balance the needs among all the value chain.
And to align the incentives to increase the odds to generate the outcome that both sides are looking for. But just for an example, we in the venture client model, we run a step in the process that we call the immersion phase, where we create a one team between the corporate executives and the startup founders to work together as a team to co-create something. And in the beginning of this step, we try to put everyone in the same page, saying, guys, now we are working together, and to work together effectively, we should know each other, and to set this starting point of a potential trust-based relationship. Felipe.
Yeah, I was thinking about this subject, and definitely we have like a culture that we need maybe more time, or someone maybe between in the process, to create this level of confidence, to start sharing, the goals, and then start building together things. So, and at the same time, it reminds me the technology and the AI, and something that you have explored already in the article, and maybe AI can help in this, and this challenge, creating like something neutral in the relation, So may I ask you about this? Because I want to connect now the AI to like something that you have been researching as well, like the open innovation. And you have just reading recently an article, a great article about how AI is impacting open innovation. And how could you explore this? Like you have identified at least 3 different ways: enhancing, enabling, replacing. Could you explore this?
Yeah, of course, And I mean, first one other thing that comes to my mind, and definitely answer the question, is, I mean, I think, so it's interesting to hear kind of the way you work, right? And as intermediaries, you basically take up that role of the trust building to some extent, like with the example you gave. So I think that in itself is very interesting to see. So you don't necessarily need AI for that, but we can talk about that in a minute. But in a way it makes sense, right? Because you have certain cultural characteristics, as you also explain. It's a huge country, so it kind of reminds me of the time I worked in Denmark, which is a somewhat smaller country, where it's not even an exaggeration, but like many people know each other still from kindergarten, so to say, right? That's sort of because it's such a small society in that sense, and the scale is so different here, right? And the culture is different.
In North Europe, there's a high institutional trust.
Also that, So with the exactly. So that smoothens some of these processes, right? So I understand you, but you take a particular role in that, and enable some of the mechanisms that helps the sort of emergence and further development of this ecosystem. So interesting to hear.
And connecting both things. Felipe said yesterday in a presentation that we used to spend 4 days co-creating a pilot project between a large company and a startup. And now using AI, we streamlined this process to 1 day, 4 hours sometimes. And in some way, the technology is enhancing the process, but I was thinking about how the trust building is being impacted by this technology, the pros and the cons, because when you spend, especially here in Brazil, 2 or 3 days working together with other people, you start building a better understanding of the other side and
Yeah, I know exactly, and then we'll also come back, of course, to your original question. Sorry for hijacking.
There are a lot
but,
of topics to be discussed.
yeah. No. That's great. That's great. That's the whole point of it. No, but so I mean, the article you mentioned that you wrote with a few colleagues is really about how AI transforms open innovation, let's say. And as you indicate, we suggest sort of 3 main modes in which that's happening. So on the one hand, it's about enhancing, and you already gave that example, including what you talked about yesterday. So AI can enhance open innovation practices. It can enable new forms of open innovation, and it may also replace some open innovation practices. And I think the example we're just talking about now, and the one you mentioned, and you also research yourself, is more on the enhancing side. And I think the example you gave is a good one, right? I mean, the metrics of it as well. So, of course, in that case, I mean, you did that process of bringing, these actors together, and you have a program for that, and then it takes 4 days to do that. But with the AI, you can speed up the process, and that's of course the big potential that AI has in creating more scale. Of course, for ideation. I mean, like there's no limit to ideas, in brainstorming and so on. But then the question is, okay, how are they filtered? Well, we can also use AI for some of that, but then there's some research that shows, well, maybe it's better at sort of weeding out the bad ideas rather than selecting the best one, right? So in the end, it's still about, okay, where do you have the human intervention in terms of, for ideation, for selection and such things. So it's still, I think, a big search of seeing, how these AI technologies and tools can be, optimally leveraged, especially also for enhancing, current practices. And at the same time, I think this was also your original question, like how it relates to, let's say, the trust issue. I think, maybe it's even could even be an example of, replacing some current practices, or maybe not strictly as such, but I think that was a little bit your point, that if you have a situation because of cultural reasons or whatever reasons, that sort of the trust is, or lack of trust is impeding, the relationships you are building or the ecosystem development, there may be ways to overcome it. Maybe you can build kind of a relationship or a connection, a collaboration that does not need to be based on trust as we traditionally know it. So then you don't need to have that same kind of investment. So I think for your business model, it may have some interesting implications, right? Because if then if there are sort of AI-based tools and mechanisms that allow you to kind of, overcome those barriers, there may be other ways to connect and to understand each other.
Do you think AI can help to overcome this cultural interference in innovation collaboration?
I mean, I would say to some extent it can, right? Because if there are certain impediments in building the relationship that are kind of based on the culture, like lack of trust or something else, it can help. It can provide other kinds of mechanisms. You also mentioned the bureaucracy issue, so I don't think it will fix the bureaucracy as such, but it can help with automating certain processes, so you're not dependent on those bureaucratic processes, right? So in that sense, I think it has really great potential.
And we always have the contracts as well too.
You do, right? So it's of course about finding the right balance. What do you put in the contract? What do you make more trust based? What do you use the AI for? And I think that will never change, but become even more important in this context.
Definitely. And what about the AI agents? That's a hot topic everybody's talking about, and there are a lot of expectations about it. How do you see them in the process? Are we ready for them
Yeah, I don't know.
as a humans?
Yeah, I'm also still learning a lot about it, I have to admit, and it's super exciting, slightly scary maybe as well, right? Just as a, as a human being, let's say. So it's a good question. Again, I mean, there's great potential, but I think it really depends on which tasks you trust, if I may use the word, the AI agent for. I think there are definitely things that can be easily automated, where totally can use machine learning to optimize the processes, and you can create things at a scale and a speed that we have not seen before. So that's great, obviously, right? And of course you have you can take it to next level, sort of multi-agent systems, right, where the agents start to talk to each other and optimize certain processes. I think we some examples as well, like with Amazon optimizing supply chain, decisions with much less sort of human intervention. And in principle, I think that's that's increasing productivity. And a useful thing. But yeah, where are the limits? Where do you want to apply it? Where not? I think this is the big question that is.
And it will not apply in the same way for every company, right? Because it all depends the maturity that you have, or how confident you are. How do you dominate that task already? To outsource that task, or for a technology in some way. So it's not gonna impact exactly the same each company. You're gonna say, okay, this is gonna substitute or replace the way that companies do. It's gonna be like different. Depends how much.
I agree. So the maturity, I think, is a good sort of analogy for that. And I've not really thought about it in that way, but maybe it's even cutting across those modes, like from enhancing, enabling, replacing. Like, of course, you can wait to be disrupted, right, and that your practices are replaced, or you are part of the change and you build it up from the inside, right? So from a strategic perspective, that's maybe part of the maturity thinking that you provide. So I think that's a useful way of looking at it. And I think in general, it's really about the let's say the AI literacy, right, within those companies, within for employees, for the teams working with innovation and other kinds of processes. So that's also something you need to build up from the inside, and that's, I mean, also if you link it to open innovation, we know that from all the research and practice in that domain, you can open the doors as much as you want, but you need the internal structures and processes and the culture to be able to optimally benefit from it, because otherwise it's going to backfire.
You need an absorptive capacity.
Exactly.
To identify, to assimilate, and to internalize these new technologies.
Exactly.
And Felipe, you have been leading our efforts in this field. And what are the use cases that you have been seeing useful to add AI in the open innovation process?
Well, we have identified like many different use cases, but I can mention we can use AI for challenge mapping, like to map trends and then connect these trends to the company challenges, and then later we can use to prioritize what challenge you're gonna put in your open innovation process in our venture client, for example. Companies are using as well for startup scouting, to connect or match the technology of the startups and the challenge, the requirements that are necessary to be matched. Companies are using as well to make decisions, to help to make decisions. So basically we have opportunities in all the phases and all the stages that we have to that we have in the open innovation process. So there are plenty of opportunities.
And where do you see sort of this internal readiness or the absorptive capacity or the maturity? Do you see stark differences there?
I think that in when the I would say I'm trying to connect with your article, and I would say that companies or the people in the companies, they are more open to use AI as an enhancer of the tasks. As a co-pilot.
Yeah.
So when they need to improve the description to get a better description, or use as an enhancer, I think is it's something like you have mentioned. So it seems like a learning curve. You start like enhancing, and then maybe you go to enabling, and then you replace.
Yeah, because you also need to build the absorptive capacity in a way, right? And it's a new technology, so I think from a kind of human capital perspective, you need to make sure that the people working for you actually have, because that's where absorptive capacity lies. It's in the mind of the individuals also, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Marco, drawing on
talking about for us here in this subject.
Drawing on our thoughts about deep tech ecosystems, let's explore a little bit Marcel's experience with European ecosystems.
Let's choose an easy topic.
Okay.
So Marcel, let's talk about IP and openness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this balance. Here in Brazil, many companies are still afraid to open up data and knowledge because they fear losing the competitive edge. Meanwhile, in Europe, we see small and medium companies and universities not only using IP as protection, but also as a currency for collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share some case or experience that shows that capacity of balancing protection and collaboration and openness?
Yeah, no, it's a great topic. It's actually the topic that
Easy
got
one,
me
right?
into the well, I've been thinking about it quite. I mean, even in my master's thesis, I already looked at that topic. So it's really fascinating.
Great.
Yeah. And actually, one of the cases from that from that research, and something that's sort of close to my home is, for example, Philips, the company Philips, right, which has played a quite central role also in the development of our local ecosystem and so on, and important relationship also with the university. So maybe that's already one example right there. So, of course, that's also where there's a significant openness, if you want to call it like that, about sharing, which is not only through sort of formal IP as such, but it's also like a relational thing. So we have, for example, we have also academic or there, these dual appointments. So somebody's working both for the university and for the company, Philips, for example. So it's a whole other kind of mechanism. What I'm trying to get at, I mean, there are different kinds of mechanisms for knowledge sharing, that also go beyond the formal IP arrangements. That said, of course, it's still an important thing, and why also this example comes to my mind is that Philips is also known, traditionally to have very strong intellectual property portfolio, and also very specific in how they protect and manage that, and through with licensing and so on. But at the same time, there are also lots of examples where they collaborated in a more open way. I mean, you can think of even things like the CD-ROM and the Blu-ray disc. I mean, something that was historically developed, and now they're more in healthcare, right? So I mean, there are sort of similar examples there, which is really about you want to share part of your knowledge. Some of it is protected, but you share it in a particular context where you do make agreements about it. Probably there's some trust that helps to make that put that to the picture as well. But that's something that you sort of manage and balance in that way. But my key point also is, like, when you talk about openness and open innovation, for me, open innovation is not just about giving everything away. I mean, openness is as much about being closed as it is about being open, if you like, right? Because it's more about sort of the strategic openness, let's say, right? So it's about where are you open, where are you closed. So of course, if there's some sort of core technology that's critical for your business, you better protect it through intellectual property mechanisms.
You have to think strategically as a portfolio.
Exactly. So what do you keep secret? What do you protect? What can you share? And that's sort of the big picture that you need to look at.
But deep dive on the corporation and university collaboration. Where do you think is the hardest part to deal to make this collaboration works? I mean, the real problem is inside the company or is inside the mindset of the university?
Yeah, I mean, these are two organizations that have quite a different institutional logic, as we call it, right? So they work different
roles in society.
Different roles, different mandates, incentives differ. So it's really quite different in that sense. Timelines, funding structure, a lot of things are different. So it's a good observation, obviously, in that sense. But still, I mean, I think it's what helps if you can work towards a common goal. Because that's the same when we talked about ecosystems. It's a joint value creation, right? And whether it's a broader ecosystem or even sort of a bilateral relationship, it's really about, okay, what do you want to achieve together? What is your common objective? And then you create a program to align those things. But of course, you have to be mindful of the differences that you have. I mean, because it's just, as you say, different roles, different incentives, and that's what you try to accommodate. Yeah.
So, talking about this common goal, let's talk about public policies and perhaps sustainability as well. So the European Union often links innovation to big societal problems, issues, challenges like climate, like health, and this is a way to establish the common goal to all the ecosystem, but sometimes corporations feel like these public policies could be an extra burden to their business. So, do you think these public policies accelerate innovation or risk slowing it down?
Yeah, both. I mean, I think that both forces exist because, I mean, of course, there is certain regulation, right, that forces companies, to report on their sustainability efforts and so on, which, may slow down innovation in some way, right, because it's an additional administrative burden. So, I mean, I think that's a kind of obvious point. At the same time, sometimes if you get an extra push, as a company, you may go that extra mile and try to find a solution
and a
for
public
that.
policy could be an incentive as well.
In that sense, and I think it's often linked also to subsidies, right? So that also it's a big the whole you have to look at the whole system. So of course that's where the benefit may lie. So then you have to invest in it, but you also get something in return. And again, this is about sort of the short and long term considerations. You may need to invest in the short term, to achieve sort of long term sustainability objectives. But and this is something some companies sort of do by themselves through their own values. But in many cases, I think you're right. It needs that additional push, more from the public side to enable that. But I mean, it's of course again the question: where do you find the right balance, and what is ultimately really going to help and be successful and solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, and it's definitely a tool to establish a common goal between different needs and organizations, right?
No, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so going deeper to this. In this scenario of public-private partnerships and corporate and university collaboration, if you could pick one European policy or institutional design and apply it tomorrow here in Brazil,
Okay.
what would it be? And why?
Yeah, I would be quite hesitant to answer
prescribe.
that question. To be honest, I think the point is that I think what I've also learned also through our research last several years in the context of innovation ecosystems is that it's very difficult actually to translate just one policy and implement it somewhere else. I mean, you can do it, but it's not always working because the characteristics of the particular region are fundamentally different. So of course, what we try
We're
to
going back to cultural difference.
exactly. So we're closing the loop, right? But I think, but it's true, right? We also see it even in the European context, right? So we also have projects where we see, okay, well, for example, in our sort of, the Eindhoven called the Brainport ecosystem, is often seen as a successful case, and say, okay, well, let's replicate that in another area. But it doesn't quite work like that, because you have cultural differences, trust levels differ, and so on. So I think it's really about understanding the fundamental mechanisms, the functioning of these ecosystems, so that which knobs you can turn depending on the situation. And I think this would be also my advice. So I mean, it's a call for more research on the topic, which makes it difficult to answer that question. But maybe later.
I was hoping
Maybe,
to have a...
Yeah, sorry.
maybe a next
Sorry about
visit
that.
here.
Yeah,
in
that's
Brazil.
my hidden agenda, of course.
So, Marcel, since Innoscience Foundation almost 20 years ago, we have been working to bridge this gap between management science and practice to bring foundational theories and fresh theories to our clients and our partners. And so this is the reason why this conversation is so special for us. And you are almost ready to launch a new book about social media as a tool for research impact. In some way, as consultants, we try to connect both sides and to spread good frameworks and theories. Could you talk a little bit about the purpose of the book and the key message of the book?
Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks. Yeah. No, so indeed, that's currently in production. So it's I mean, super exciting for myself and my co-author as well, of course. So basically, the book, is about how, that's also the subtitle, how scholars can share ideas, build networks, and make a difference. That's sort of what we want to focus on. And not in the sense that, like this is just, as scholars, we can use social media to push, everything that we do into the world. No, I mean, it's also really a much more balanced view that we try to promote. So it's also really about, finding kind of an authentic voice, finding the right way to share, but also to listen, also to try to look for. I mean, it's also about you can do small things that ultimately have a bigger impact, right? So, and it's something that I think is useful for both established scholars and still emerging junior scholars as well. But of course, you do that in different ways. But in that book, we try to put that sort of balanced perspective. Also, have more kind of a, let's say, that you're sort of mindful, even like ethical considerations in terms of what you can share, how you can connect. We develop, we call it a researcher social media compass. So it has a couple of elements that can help you, like, what is your purpose, what is your personality, which platforms can you use, and those sort of things, to have also a concrete tool to put these things in practice and make it fit with, your own objectives and who you are. So that's really the objective of that book, and we also hope to contribute to people, academics in particular, to find that balanced perspective, to maybe just take that little extra effort, but of course all in perspective, because it's on top of course the fundamental activity we do in our teaching and in our research. This is still something that remains very important. But we hope with that book we can also inspire others to open up a little bit their perspectives and think on smart, efficient and effective ways to use social media to create more impact and in their academic careers.
This is the social media will not replace the quality of the research, but it will. It's like a tool to increase the impact and maybe share with the society, because this is an issue that we have. Like sometimes the knowledge is just inside the academia and the society.
Yeah, we even make the point that I think you even have an ethical obligation to share your research to the wider public, right? So you can even put it in that perspective. There are different ways to do that, right? I mean, also other than social media, but it's of course a very pervasive kind of technology and it's accessible in that way. And talking about AI, I mean, there are also kind of, these emerging tools you can use to become more sort of efficient and effective in it. But again, there also you need to find the right balance. I think we all recognize, the posts that are generated by AI compared to the ones that have also the human, the personal touch to it. Yeah, so, I mean, also those kind of things we try to address in the book. And actually we start by saying, okay, there's kind of, there's still this sort of slow-paced world of, research, right? It's still, doing the research takes long, getting things published takes very long, you go to conferences. So, I mean, that process is still there and critical. So I think the risk is you may jump directly to the social media. Now, that's something you should avoid to do. You should really focus on, getting the fundamental skills you need to become a good researcher. But then indeed use this on top of it, because you can use it, again, to share your ideas, to get inspiration from others, to build those networks. And maybe it helps to get invited to great cities to talk about this sort of stuff, So it's, and then it's these all kind of small things that I think will add up and make a bigger difference in the long term.
And talking about great cities, you are going to be in Bilbao.
True, yeah.
Can you invite our audience to go to Bilbao for the World of Open Innovation Conference? We are going to be there presenting a best practice about the use of AI in the venture client model. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the role you play and the
sure.
Open Innovation
Conference? Thanks.
Conference?
Yeah, so the World Open Innovation Conference. So I'm the conference chair of that one, took over from Henry Chesbrough some years ago. So that has been a great experience in itself, because of course, it's an annual conference, and we go to different locations every year. But it's really about the community also, and it's also a community that is really interested in also making this bridge between theory and practice. So that makes it a little bit, I would say, kind of a unique conference, or at least different from a traditional academic conference with only academic papers, also different from like an industry conference where only companies are, but we have both in a way. So we have sessions that are more academic papers, we have sessions like the best practice, so looking forward to that already, of course, where it's more about practical examples of use of open innovation. And we have other sort of sessions which are more like sort of industry challenges, we have workshops, so we have different things. This year it's indeed in Bilbao, so also really great city in itself, highly recommended, where we'll be in November, early November, to talk about all these topics and really push the frontier of open innovation research and practice. And we organize it with a large team, focus on the industry side, the academic side, also the engagement side. So I'm personally looking forward, and everybody definitely invited to continue the conversation there.
Thank you. So, guys, thanks for being with us in this very special episode of the Corporate Innovation Talks. We talked about ecosystems, the role of AI in the open innovation process, about deep tech, IP, and cultural challenges. So it's been inspiring to see how research can bring fresh perspectives to practicing in such a tangible way. So Marcel, thanks for
thank you
for being with us.
Well, thanks. It was
Thank
great
you,
conversation,
Thank you,
and
Marcel.
really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you later, guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Nice,
Bye.
yeah.
Thanks.